Grimora.
When I was a kid, there were things in my family we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about my father's disappearance. We didn't talk about why my grandmother sealed off the east wing of the old mansion. And we never, ever talked about Blackwood House after dark. I was 10 when I last saw it. The sprawling estate sitting on the edge of the Atlantic cliffs in northern Maine. The kind of place that looks like it was built for ghosts, not people. Even back then, something about the house always felt awake. My grandmother, Evelyn Blackwood, died last fall. Her lawyer called me a few days after the funeral, his voice trembling slightly, like he was scared to even mention the place. "Miss Blackwood left the property to you, Daniel," he said. "But she also left instructions. The house must never remain empty overnight." That made no sense. Why would she care about an empty house? Still, I had nowhere else to go. My teaching contract in Boston had ended, and the idea of getting away from the noise, the city, the endless reminders of what I'd lost, it didn't sound so bad. So, on a gray November morning, I packed my car and drove north. The farther I went, the thinner the roads became, until the highway turned into cracked asphalt and then into winding dirt, choked by pine and fog. It was dusk when I reached the gates. They were rusted, tall, and carved with the same words etched into my childhood nightmares. Blackwood Estate, 1893. The house stood beyond them like a corpse, its tall spires silhouetted against the last bruised light of evening, windows like blind eyes. As I pulled up the gravel path, I noticed something odd, a faint glow in the east wing. That wing should have been sealed off for decades. I killed the engine. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, like sound itself didn't dare step too close. When I pushed open the front door, the smell hit me. Dust, rot, and something faintly sweet, like old perfume. "Hello?" My voice vanished into the dark hall. No response, just the groan of the old wood beneath my feet. The lawyer had left the keys in an envelope. I found them on the hall table, along with a small folded note written in my grandmother's hand. The handwriting was fragile but certain. "Daniel, do not go into the east wing after sundown. Evelyn." I remember frowning. The light I'd seen earlier had come from that wing. I told myself it was probably a reflection, or maybe a squatter, or hell, maybe I was just tired. But something deep inside me knew better. When I lit the fireplace that night, the air felt alive, like the house was breathing in sync with me. Every gust of wind, every faint creak carried a rhythm that didn't feel random. Around midnight, I woke to a noise, a slow, steady tapping from somewhere inside the walls. At first, I thought it was the pipes, but the tapping, it had a pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more, then silence, and then a whisper, faint, female, coming from the east wing. "Danny?" No one had called me that since I was a child. I sat there in the dark, every hair on my body standing upright, my breath shallow and visible in the cold air. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A faint shape reflected in the old mirror above the fireplace. A woman, pale, thin, standing just behind me in the reflection, eyes black and hollow. I spun around. Nothing. But the mirror, though, was fogged over, as if someone had just breathed across the glass, and written in the condensation were 2 words: "Welcome home."
I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the dying fire until dawn, watching my reflection in that old mirror like it might move again. By morning, the fog outside had swallowed the cliffs. The ocean was nothing but a low growl behind it. I told myself the whisper had been a dream, the message on the glass a trick of condensation, but the longer I stayed, the more I felt something shifting in the air, like the house itself had noticed I was back. After coffee that tasted like ashes, I began to wander. Blackwood House was a labyrinth. 2 stories high, with corridors that doubled back on themselves and staircases that ended in locked doors. The wallpaper was peeling in long curls, showing the faint outline of crosses painted beneath it. Every mirror was draped with a white sheet. Every portrait had eyes that seemed just a little too wet, a little too alive. In the West Hall, I found the first portrait of her. A woman in her late 20s, dressed in black, hands folded neatly in her lap. Her face was pale, calm, but her eyes, those eyes were empty, painted with such depth that they looked like holes punched through the canvas. No pupils, just black. A brass plaque below read, "Eleanor Blackwood, 1893 to 1915. My grandmother's mother, my great-grandmother." The family never spoke of her, except for whispers that she'd taken ill. But I remembered something my father once mumbled when he was drunk, long ago. "She's the reason the house breathes at night." I moved closer. For a moment, I could swear I saw a thin line of moisture trailing down from the corner of her eye. A tear. Paint doesn't cry. I reached out to touch it, and the canvas shivered. Just a flicker, like the skin of something alive. I stumbled back, knocking over a vase that shattered against the wooden floor. And as the sound echoed, I heard it again, that faint tapping from inside the walls. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. It came from behind the portrait. I pressed my ear to the plaster. Something moved in there, slow, wet, sliding along the old beams. And then, softly, almost lovingly, a voice whispered through the crack. "You look just like him." I froze. The air turned icy, my breath clouding the glass of the frame. The portrait's eyes seemed deeper now, darker, like they were pulling the light out of the hallway. Then came the smell, sweet rot, like lilies left too long in still water. I couldn't stay there. I grabbed the portrait from the wall and turned it around, desperate to stop those eyes from watching me. Behind it, the wallpaper was cracked and flaking, revealing a small wooden hatch built into the wall, something I'd never seen before. It had been nailed shut. Carved into the wood was a symbol, an eye open wide with a single tear dripping from it. I ran my fingers over it, and the wood felt warm, too warm. Daniel. I turned so fast I nearly fell. At the end of the hallway, halfway swallowed by the shadows, stood a woman. Not a ghost, not quite. A figure in gray, her face blurred by the dim light, her dress dragging across the floor like mist. Her eyes, empty, black pits locked onto mine. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered. and before I could move, before I could even breathe, she vanished, dissolving into the air like smoke. The hallway was silent again. Only the faint echo of those words clung to me. When I looked back at the hatch, the wood was wet. A single drop of dark water or blood slid down the grain and hit the floorboards with a soft tick. I didn't open it. Not yet. I needed daylight, I told myself. I needed answers. So I went to the attic. The only place in the house that felt untouched by whatever this was. Inside, I found boxes of letters, journals, and photographs, all belonging to my grandmother, and tucked inside a faded leather notebook was a photograph of the same woman from the portrait, Eleanor, standing in front of the house. She was holding a small boy by the hand. His face was mine.
I stared at that photograph for what felt like forever. The woman, Eleanor Blackwood, stood in front of the same house I was standing in now. And next to her, the small boy holding her hand had my face. Same eyes, same scar on the chin. Except this photo had been taken nearly 100 years ago. My heart thudded so hard it made my ribs ache. I flipped the photo over. On the back, written in faint, slanted handwriting, were 3 words. He always returns. The attic felt smaller suddenly, like the shadows were closing in. I opened the leather notebook next. It smelled like dust and old grief. Inside were pages of neat cursive handwriting, my grandmother's journal entries. The first one was dated June 4th, 1952. The house breathes again. I hear it at night, same as when I was a girl. Mother still stands in the West Hall, though she's gone 37 years. I think she's waiting for him. She keeps calling the name Daniel. I read that name over and over. Daniel. The same name her mother, the woman in the portrait, had whispered through the walls. My skin prickled. I flipped the page. Father sealed the crying room after the incident, but it doesn't matter. The sound goes through the wood. Always 3 knocks. Always before dawn. The crying room. That must have been the locked hatch behind the portrait. If the child returns, the house will wake. I've burned the old cradle, but I know she's still looking for him. The hollow eyes will open again. The handwriting broke off there. The jagged tear ran through the paper as if it had been clawed. I sat back against a wall, trying to make sense of it. I was born miles away from here. My parents had never brought me to Maine. So how could my face, my name, exist in a photograph from the 1900s? The wind outside moaned through the eaves, and I swear it carried a voice. Soft, pleading. Don't let her find you. I slammed the journal shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. And then I heard something upstairs, just above the attic ceiling. A faint, dragging noise. Footsteps. But there was nothing above the attic. The sound moved, slowly, like something crawling along the beams overhead. And then a child's giggle. High, distant, and echoing through the walls. My flashlight flickered. I aimed it toward the sound, and for a split second, I saw it. A hand. Small. Pale. Dangling from the ceiling hatch. Tiny fingers twitching. And then it pulled back, vanishing into the darkness. I rushed downstairs, heart pounding, each step creaking beneath my feet. The whole house seemed alive now, murmuring beneath the wind's breath. When I reached the parlor, I saw something that froze me where I stood. The portrait of Eleanor, the one I had turned around, was upright again, and the woman's painted face was smiling. She hadn't been smiling before. I would have sworn it. Her hand, once folded at her lap, was now pointing toward the wall hatch behind her frame. "He's waiting for you," a voice murmured behind me. Spun around. No one there. Only the faint scent of lilies, the smell of the dead. I stepped closer to the portrait. The wood around it was still wet, but this time the stain had spread, forming a dark, round mark on the floorboards, almost like an eye opening. The air turned heavy. The candlelight flickered, though there were no candles. And somewhere beneath the floor, something knocked. 3 times, slow, rhythmic, from below. The cellar, the one place I hadn't gone yet. I grabbed my lantern and started down the narrow steps. Each one moaned beneath my weight. The smell of rot grew stronger. The cellar was cold, colder than the outside wind. I swept my light across the room, over broken furniture, rusted tools, and a stone wall slick with moisture. And then I saw it. Etched into the foundation, the same symbol from the hatch upstairs. The crying eye. Only this one was bigger, carved deep and filled with something dark, something that shimmered in the lamplight. Blood. And just below it, carved into the stone, the phrase, "The eye opens when he returns." I turned to run, but standing at the top of the stairs, blocking the way out, was the boy from the photograph. He looked maybe 8 years old. Same eyes, same scar, same face as mine. "You left her. Now she wants you back." Before I could speak, the lantern went out. The darkness swallowed everything. And in that black silence, something breathed behind me. Slow, wet, alive. "Daniel."
When the light died, it wasn't just dark. It was like the darkness had weight, pressing on my chest, choking the air out of me. Something moved behind me. Slow steps, bare feet scraping against stone. The sound came closer, and the boy's whisper floated through the pitch black. "You shouldn't have come back, Daniel. She doesn't forget." My shaking hands found the lantern and the matchbox. When the flame caught, for a split second the whole cellar flickered to life, and there she was, the woman from the portrait, Eleanor. Her face pale as wax, eyes black and hollow, standing right behind the boy. Her bony hands rested on his shoulders like claws. She smiled, a smile that was too wide for a human face. "You look just like him," she said, "the one she took." Before I could even move, the lantern burst, glass shattering, flames dying in a hiss. I stumbled up the stairs in blind panic, slamming the cellar door shut behind me. The house groaned around me. Every wall seemed to breathe. The portrait's faces flickered in the dim light, eyes following me as I moved through the hall. I reached the west hallway again, the one with the sealed hatch behind Eleanor's portrait. It was open now. The nails that had once held it shut lay scattered on the floor, bent and blackened. The wood hung loose, and a faint, cold light seeped through the crack. And underneath that light, the sound. Crying. Soft, childlike sobs from inside the wall. I knelt down and slowly pulled the hatch open. The crying stopped. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. The space behind the wall was narrow, a hidden room no more than a few feet wide, like someone had built it to hide in. The walls were covered in old drawings, crude sketches in charcoal, faces with black eyes, children with no mouths, and at the center of it all, the crying eye symbol. On the floor sat a small cradle,
half-rotted, draped in cobwebs. Inside was a bundle of fabric, once white, now dark with age. And when I pulled the cloth away, I saw the tiny bones of a child. I stumbled backward, my knees hitting the floor. The air grew cold enough to burn, and then from the cradle, a small sound escaped, like a sigh. The bundle shifted, and one of the bones rolled toward me. It stopped against my boot, perfectly still. I looked up, and on the wall above the cradle, written in dark red letters, were the words, "She feeds on memory." And then a whisper, soft as a breath, right by my ear. "You forgot me." The walls shuddered. The cradle began to rock on its own, and I saw her again, Eleanor, standing in the corner of the crying room, her mouth trembling, her eyes leaking black tears. "He was mine," she hissed. "She took him from me." "Who?" I gasped. "Who took him?" Her head twitched violently, her body jerking like a marionette. When she spoke again, her voice came in layers, her own, the boy's, and another, deeper, ancient one beneath it. "The hollow eyes see through you now." The walls began to ripple like water. The drawings moved, twisting into screaming faces. The cradle burst into flames, without heat, burning silently, white and bright. I ran. Through the hall, through the parlor, up the stairs, but the house seemed to shift with me, stretching the corridors, changing the doors. Every time I reached a doorway, it led back into the crying room. It was like the house was folding in on itself, like I was trapped inside its memory. Then I heard my name again, soft and pleading. "Daniel, help me." It was the voice of a child, the same boy. He stood in the doorway now, eyes hollow, tears black and thick. He reached out a hand to me. "She won't let me go. You have to see what she did." His hand was ice when I took it. The moment our skin touched, the world shattered. The house dissolved, the walls melting away, and I was standing in the same room, but 100 years in the past. The wallpaper was new, the cradle was fresh wood, and in it lay a baby, crying. Eleanor knelt beside it, weeping. A man entered the room, tall, dark coat, his face hidden. He said something I couldn't hear, then pulled the baby from her arms. Eleanor screamed, clawing at him, but he was gone, vanishing into the shadow that swallowed the door. She fell to her knees, eyes wide, and whispered the same words that had been written behind the portrait. "He always returns." When she looked up, her gaze met mine, and for the first time I realized she wasn't seeing a vision. She was seeing me. She screamed, "Give him back!" and lunged toward me. The moment she touched me, the vision broke. The house slammed back into existence. The floor cracked beneath me, and I fell. Down, down, into darkness.
When I hit the ground, everything went white. For a moment, I thought I'd died. The air was so cold it burned my throat, and my head rang like a bell. When my vision returned, I realized I was no longer inside the house. The space around me was stone, damp, curved, ancient, a tunnel. The walls pulsed faintly, like veins. Roots hung from the ceiling, dripping water that smelled of rust and earth. The floor beneath me wasn't solid. It was soft, like packed soil,
and my hands came away black with rot. I looked up and saw the faint outline of the broken boards above. Somehow, I'd fallen through the foundation into a hidden passage. The air carried a rhythm, a pulse. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. The same pattern as the knocking. Somewhere ahead, a faint light flickered, orange like candlelight. I followed it. Every step echoed down the tunnel, swallowed by the damp. Symbols lined the walls. The crying eye, again and again, painted in ash. Some fresh, some centuries old. The light grew stronger until I stepped into a chamber, round, vast, and at its center stood a massive wooden chair, carved from a single tree trunk, blackened with age. Around it, the floor was marked with salt and something darker, something crusted. The same crying eye symbol had been carved into the ground, but this one wasn't just a carving. It was filled with dried blood. On the walls, dozens of faces stared back at me, portraits of the Blackwood family, their eyes hollowed out, paint scraped away where pupils should have been. It was like the entire family had been stripped of their sight, and above it all hung a single phrase, written in trembling script. "She sees through those who remain." A voice came from behind me. "You shouldn't have followed her here." It was the boy, standing in the doorway, pale, his hair matted with dust. "Who is she?" I asked, but before he could answer, his body twisted, his face contorting, and out his mouth came a woman's voice. "You know who I am." His eyes went black, and his head jerked back unnaturally. The sound that came next wasn't human, a low, gurgling sob, half pain, half laughter. "They buried me in this house. They sealed my child away. And when the house forgot, I made it remember." I stumbled back toward the exit, but the tunnel behind me was gone. Only solid stone. The chamber had closed itself. "Every son born of my blood carries him," she whispered through the boy's mouth. "The child she stole from me. The curse doesn't die, it just wears new skin." The realization hit like ice. I was part of her bloodline. The photographs, the journals, the name, Daniel. Each generation had one. Each had returned to the house. My voice shook. "What do you want from me?" The boy stepped closer. His small hand rose, and his finger pressed against my chest. "To see." The moment he touched me, my vision exploded in white light. I saw flashes, Eleanor screaming as they took her baby, the villagers sealing her in the basement, the crying eye carved into the walls as they buried her alive, her voice echoing through time, through blood, through me. When I came back to myself, I was sitting in that wooden chair at the center of the ritual circle. Salt and blood surrounded me. My hands were bound, and Eleanor stood across from me, no longer ghostly, but solid, real. Her eyes, hollow voids, dripped tears of black tar. "You are the last. The blood must close." The chair began to creak beneath me, the carvings glowing faintly red. It felt like the wood was breathing. "Let me see what you remember." Her hands reached forward and pressed against my eyes. Pain. Fire. I screamed as something cold and alive crawled into my skull. Images flooded my mind, faces, deaths, the endless line of Blackwoods who'd all returned, all taken by her. She was using me to relive every life, every moment of loss, to feed on those memories. I fought against it, against her voice clawing through my head. Somewhere deep inside me, something ancient stirred, a spark of resistance left behind by those who had resisted her before. "You're not my blood," I whispered. "You're what's left of this house." Her grip faltered. The chamber walls began to tremble, the portraits vibrating on the stone, the roots overhead twisted like snakes. "You can't break it," she hissed. "The hollow eyes see forever." "Then I'll make them blind." I wrenched free, the ropes snapping as the salt line broke. The chair's carvings flared bright white, burning, collapsing inward as the entire room shuddered. Eleanor screamed, a sound that seemed to tear through every wall, every floorboard above us. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I was lying at the foot of the main staircase. The morning light was pouring through the windows. The house was still again. No whispers, no breathing walls, no portraits watching. It was over. Or so I thought.
Morning sunlight spilled through the cracked windows like mercy I didn't deserve. For a long while, I just lay there on the cold floor, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something. A whisper, a shadow, another breath from the walls. But the house was quiet. Too quiet. I pushed myself up slowly, every muscle stiff, my head throbbing with dull pain. The floorboards were splintered where I'd fallen. Dust hung in the sunlight like floating ash. It felt like I'd crawled out of a nightmare. But nightmares don't leave bruises or blood on your hands. I needed to leave. That thought pulsed through my skull like a heartbeat. Get out. Now. I found my keys on the hallway table, next to a small framed photo of my grandmother. She looked young there, smiling faintly. But the longer I looked, the more her expression seemed to change. Her lips curled upward just a bit too far, her eyes darkening. I turned the frame face down. When I stepped outside, the air was different. Crisp, still. No sound of the sea, no wind through the trees. Just silence, like the world itself was holding its breath. I walked toward my car parked under the pine trees. Each step felt heavier, slower, like the ground wanted me to stay. When I reached for the door handle, I saw it in the window's reflection, a shape standing on the porch behind me. Eleanor. Her figure was faint, translucent in the sunlight, but those eyes, hollow and endless, glowed faintly black. She lifted one trembling hand and pointed at me. "You opened the eye. Now it sees through you." I spun around, but the porch was empty. The silence pressed tighter. Even the gulls had vanished from the cliffs. I started the car, gravel crunching under the tires as I drove down the winding road. For the first time since arriving, I felt free. The house shrank behind me, swallowed by fog. I promised myself I would never return. But 10 miles down the road, I saw movement in the rearview mirror. Just a flicker, something in the back seat. My heart stopped. I turned the mirror slightly and saw a child's face reflected there. The boy, the one from the photograph. He was sitting quietly, hands folded, eyes black and empty. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded sideways, gravel spraying. When I turned around,
The seat was empty. Nothing but the smell of damp earth lingering in the air. My pulse thundered in my ears. I got out, pacing on the empty road, whispering to myself that I was just tired, hallucinating. But then I noticed something. The ground beneath the car was wet. A small puddle forming under the trunk. It wasn't oil. It was black, thick, and when I touched it, it moved. It slithered along my skin like something alive, crawling up my wrist, cold as death. I screamed and wiped it off against the gravel. The liquid hissed, smoking faintly in the sunlight. That's when I saw my reflection in the car window. My eyes, they weren't mine anymore. The pupils had grown darker, wider, almost consuming the color entirely. And faintly, beneath the reflection, I saw her, Eleanor's face, smiling. "You can't leave," she whispered inside my skull. "The eye remembers." I stumbled backward, gasping, as the car engine roared on its own. The radio flickered alive, crackling static. Then an old woman's voice drifted through. "He always returns." The same words, the same voice from the journals. I ran. Down the road, into the woods, branches whipped across my arms, thorns catching my clothes. But no matter how far I ran, I kept seeing glimpses of her. Behind every tree, between every shadow. And worse, I could hear the house, the same heartbeat sound, faint, pulsing through the soil beneath my feet. It wasn't just in the house, it was beneath everything. The forest thinned, and ahead of me I saw a clearing, and in its center a pond, so still it looked like glass. I stumbled to the edge, gasping, trying to wash my hands of the black stain that wouldn't come off. When I looked down into the water, I froze. My reflection blinked, but I didn't. And then it smiled, slowly, deliberately. The reflection's mouth opened, whispering from beneath the surface. "You think you escaped? She never leaves the blood." A hand broke the water, small, pale, childlike, grabbing my wrist and pulling me down. Cold water filled my lungs, darkness swallowing everything. For a moment I thought I was drowning, but when I opened my eyes, I wasn't underwater. I was standing in the west hallway again, back inside Blackwood House. The portrait of Eleanor hung perfectly on the wall, freshly cleaned. The hatch behind it was sealed. The air smelled of lilies. From somewhere deep in the house, a lullaby began to play. Soft, distant, sweet. And my reflection in the mirror at the end of the hall, it smiled again. "Welcome home," it said.
I don't remember how long I stood there, watching my own reflection whisper things I didn't say. Time felt strange inside the house. The morning light that had followed me was gone, replaced by the gray dusk that seemed to last forever. Every window showed the same view. Fog. No ocean, no trees, no sky. Just thick, living fog that pressed against the glass like it wanted to get in. But the truth was far worse. It already was in. I found myself walking again, barefoot, the wooden floor cold beneath my feet. The house breathed slow and steady now, as if its heart had synced with mine. I could hear it pulsing in the walls, in the stairs, in the hollow air between rooms. When I passed a mirror, my reflection moved before I did. It tilted its head, lips curling upward into that same too wide grin. "You're remembering now," it said softly. "You never left. You've been here all along." I reached out to touch the glass, and my reflection's hand met mine from the other side. The surface rippled like water. I felt warmth, cold warmth, seeping into my skin. A faint pressure behind my eyes, something pushing its way forward. I stumbled back, heart pounding, but the reflection didn't stop. It kept staring, smiling. "Eleanor isn't the curse. She's the door." And then the lights went out. For a moment, everything was black. Then candles flickered to life on their own, lining the hallway, the same hallway from my first night here. The same wax-streaked candles from decades past. Their flames burned black, their light bending the shadows instead of chasing them. The portraits on the walls, the family, their eyes were no longer hollow. They were full, alive. And every one of them was looking at me. "You're the last," they whispered together. "You close the eye." Their faces began to weep. Not tears, ink. Thick, black trails that crawled down the walls, dripping from the frames, forming words on the floorboards. The eye must see. I ran. I didn't know where. Maybe to the front door, maybe anywhere, but every corridor folded back into the same place. The West Hall, the portrait, the crying room. The hatch was open again. And inside, the cradle was gone. In its place, a mirror. Tall, framed in rotted wood, covered in faint handprints. I saw myself in it, trembling, eyes black around the edges, and behind me stood Eleanor, her face calm now, almost gentle. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered. "I wanted to end it." "Then end it. Let me go." She shook her head slowly. "You are me. You always were. We've been waking, over and over, waiting for the last one to return. The blood remembers, the eye remembers, and now it sees." Her hand touched my shoulder, and warmth spread through my chest. The house began to tremble, dust raining from the ceiling. The portrait screamed, the candles burst. The fog outside pressed harder against the glass, cracking it like ice. "Look," she said. "See what you really are." And I did. The reflection in the mirror changed, not me, not Eleanor, but something between. A face carved from shadow and memory, eyes hollow, bottomless, yet filled with faint flickers of every face that had ever lived in this house. My family, all of them, all trapped here, feeding it, keeping it alive. I reached out, and my reflection reached back. When our fingers met, the world folded inward. Sound became silence, light became smoke. And then, nothing. When I opened my eyes again, it was morning. The sun was bright, the air was clean, the house was gone. Nothing remained of Blackwood House but the foundation stones, half buried in grass. I stood there for a long time, unsure if I'd ever left at all. A man walking his dog on the dirt road stopped and stared at me. "Hey there," he called out. "You okay there?" I nodded, though my throat was dry. "What happened to the house?" He frowned. "What house? Ain't been nothing here in 60 years. I turned back to the ruins, and there among the stones, half buried, was a small mirror. Cracked, old, its glass reflecting just enough to see a faint shape behind me. A woman in black, smiling. Later that night, I checked into a motel outside town. I wanted to sleep, to forget. But when I closed my eyes, I saw hers, and behind my eyelids, the world pulsed. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats. The same rhythm, the same breath. I looked in the bathroom mirror one last time before bed, and this time, my reflection didn't smile. It just whispered, "He always returns." Grimora.